And welcome as we come to our late afternoon and evening Vespers as we take a moment and reflect upon the Christmas story, and in particular, as we reflect upon the presence and role of angels in our lives and in our midst. And so I'd like to offer all of you a very special welcome, and those who are joining us online as well. So grateful that you are with us this afternoon. There are a lot of words of gratitude and appreciation that I want to lift up. And first, I want to say thank you to David Scripsima, who has planned this service, who dreamed that it would be possible, who helped to organize it, and was willing to share his gift of music, and grateful for you. Grateful also for Margaret Luke, who is playing piano with us this evening, and of all of the men who David talked and asked to be able to host the tea and to join us this afternoon. Thank you. Our guest speaker this afternoon is Dr. Jacquelyn Olivera. She has been a college educator for the last 50 years and is an educator in sociology and is a sociologist. She is also one who does death education and is a grief therapist, and she also happens to be what I would call an expert on angels. And so I know it will be an incredible blessing for all of us this evening to be able to hear her share in witness and testimony and knowledge about angels that are in Scripture and angels in our midst, and how it is that they have influenced, impacted, and changed people's lives. And so grateful for her to be with us this afternoon. Lastly, we are going to sing some Christmas carols. We just can't seem to get enough doing that during this season. I'm going to invite you to just stay seated while we sing all of them, except for the last one. So when we sing Love Came Down at Christmas, I'll stand, but that will give us an opportunity to stretch for a moment before Jacquelyn shares her presentation with us. Again, I'm grateful that you are here and for this opportunity for us to be able to take a moment to further prepare ourselves for the coming of Christ. All of the music and the text to the hymns you can find in the red hymnal, which are in the pew pockets or on the pews right next to you.
Okay? Yeah? Okay. I'm Jacquelyn Olivera, and I'm very, very happy to be here. Much happier than you can imagine. Susan was my pastor for many years in Whitefish Bay, and so we loved her then. I love her now. I have great admiration for her, and so it's good to be with her at her new church. And all of you, you're very comfortable to be with. You were friendly. You were very kind to me throughout the day. And so we're going to start talking about angels. You have a packet, and I would like to take that with you because I'll tell you what we will be doing. All right, the first sheet should say, we don't believe in miracles, we rely on them. That kind of sets the atmosphere, you know. It fills us with confidence. It's exactly what God wants. It's exactly what the angels want. And we're ready for that. Some of you, I'm sure, have testimonies of that. I know in my life I have many testimonies of that. The second sheet is a poem by Rumi. Everything you see has its roots in the unseen world. The forms may change, yet the essence remains the same. Every wondrous sight will vanish, and every sweet word will fade, but do not be disheartened. The source they come from is eternal, growing, branching out, giving new life and new joy. Why do you weep? That source is within you as well. So, when are you being angelic? And how are you experiencing the joy and the exuberance that comes from the presence and the power of angels, God's angels? Okay, I think the next two should be the story of angels at Christmas. Always seemed to me only a lovely legend until one extraordinary day in May. And Praise Him these are testimonies, right? Am I right with you where you are now? All right, those are testimonies, so that's your homework. You know, when it's all finished, take it home, and when you're drinking your tea, reflect on it. I tried to give you a smattering of various kinds. All right, the next two sheets might be, let's see. Oops, this one's different. Okay, it should be, this one's different. Thank you, this one didn't have it, thank you. I saw him myself. I may start us off with that. It's a testimony, and I'll blend that with something that occurred recently in our church that is quite similar. The other is the guardian angel prayers, and what I would like us to do when I get to that point is recite that together. So the first two paragraphs, angel of God, my guardian dear, we will work with that when the time comes. And then, okay, then you should have a meditation that 3/4 of the way through, I will ask you to join with me in the meditation and see where that takes us. And then you have a poem called Awakening. I'll explain to you how that came. And then you have a cartoon at the end. If somebody dies in the hospital, angels move them to the eternity ward. And that certainly is one of the functions of angels, actually. So, do I owe you something now? Are you missing something? Okay, so there we go. Those are yours. Okay, so that's the little packet you have as we go on. Several years ago, a very dear friend of mine invited me to attend the Broadway play, Man of La Mancha, when it arrived in Milwaukee. In the play, we learn that Don Quixote at one point is nearing his death after having been mocked and scorned because he thought positively and upheld hope in his life. As he tries to defend himself, he asks a very meaningful and ultimate question. Who's the crazy one? Am I crazy because I see the world as it could become? Or is the world crazy because it only sees itself as it is? surely when we have experiences with the angels, and in and of themselves, they want a more hopeful world and give us reason to believe in that, reason to live that way. Rabbi Abraham Heschel reminds us that each moment contains 100 messages from God. But are we aware of that? And can we enter into that kind of energy and then continue to expand it? If we go to Albert Schweitzer, he says the highest knowledge is to know that we are surrounded by mystery, and only faith made flexible by mystery and wonder is adequate faith for today. The way of faith, as the Psalms state, is often through a sense of wonder and the practice of humility, and I would add patience. Certainly in the spiritual journey that we have, and certainly as angels try to make their presence known to us and invite us into the journey at higher levels, it requires patience, right? We're not in control. So admittedly, God's universe is one of awe and mystery and majesty. The Hebrews believed the visible world represented only a fraction of the diversity and beauty of the created universe, and that the far greater invisible part of the universe was populated with spiritual beings. And over time, especially in these last 30 years, more and more angel activity is becoming conscious to individuals, to groups, in churches, and beyond that. Ultimately, we are dealing with a divine unfolding plan and mystery. We're gathered here this afternoon to honor God's holy angels. I'm going to take just a moment to refer to God's fallen angels, evil spirits, demonic forces, and demonic energy. You cannot really speak of or recognize the power and grandeur of angels, at least in the human community, without recognizing spiritual warfare. Now, I haven't gone to too many angel seminars, but I've gone to about 3, and over the years, much earlier. And so what they do is they get us together and they tell nice angel stories, and it makes us feel very good, and then we walk out feeling very good. Well, I'm going to try to do that too, and in my 3-hour seminars that Susan referred to, I cut out a section for working with the fallen angels, because we have to struggle with them all the time. I won't do that today because we're restricted by time, but I'll make reference to it here and there. All right, so we're dealing with a divine unfolding plan and mystery in the universe, and we are a vital part of that, or you wouldn't be here. At the same time, however, we're responsible for what is knowable, and I believe we must have the courage to express it, reveal it, advance it, and share it. And I'm talking about angel experiences. I'm talking about non-ordinary states of consciousness. I'm talking about out-of-body experiences. You know, I wrote the book, The Case for Life Beyond Death, because, well, it was the result of all the work I was doing with death and dying and grievers. That was 20 years ago when it was published, and one of the reasons I did that was to try to bring the church and science together, and so that they were communicating with one another. So at that time, we weren't as enthusiastic about everything that's unfolding now. Now, many of the churches are ahead of it. I mean, the very fact that you're having an angel seminar today speaks well for all of you, and certainly coming in today to take part of it speaks very well for you. God uses many means to touch our hearts, to enlighten our minds, and to feed our souls and move our wills. Angels are only one part of that. They're a very important part of it, but they're only one part of that. So I would ask you, how do you hear the voice of God or know the presence of God in your life? How do you enter into that energy? How do you respond to that energy? How do you cling to the possibilities of that? And there are many answers to that. Let me just stop and ask, how many of you believe in angels? How many of you don't? And how many of you are not sure? So let me ask the first part. How many of you believe in angels? Pretty much everybody, and I probably would expect that in the church community. How many of you know people who don't? Yeah, right. And so many people who have very, very real experiences with angels don't share them because they don't want to be made fun of. They don't want people telling you, oh, there are other explanations for that. And so I think in the world in which we live today, we need to step up and say, and I'll give you an example of that a little bit later. We need to say, oh, yes, I have had an experience of an angel, and that it did bring me closer to God. All right. I think many people who are in this field recognize that increased angelic communication is just bringing us to a more conscious realization of who we are and a more intimate relationship with God. Teilhard de Chardin reminds us that we are spirits having a human experience, not humans having a spiritual experience. And there's lots of work done at that level. Let me stop again. How many of you feel that you have experienced an angel? Good. Very good. Excellent. How many of you have friends who would admit that to you, that in their own lives they have? Okay, I see. Good. All right. So over the last century, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of people who have had miraculous experiences with angels. Anyone who studies the phenomena will quickly conclude that there are unseen forces continually guiding and directing humanity's path. This seems paradoxical to the reasoning mind. To many, if something cannot be seen, it does not exist. People often scoff at the idea of invisible forces and psychic spiritual phenomena, but this thinking is being replaced by countless unexplainable encounters which indicate that something divine is indeed at work in the world today. We have countless examples of that in the church community as well as in the wider community as well, and I'll share some of those testimonies. Now, if my energy holds and we have the time, I'll do a major testimony at the end of our session. I call your attention to a quote I love from John Milton's Paradise Lost 4 because it's so very true. Milton wrote, "Millions of spiritual creatures walk the earth unseen, unseen both when we wake and when we sleep. All these with ceaseless praise, his works behold both day and night." All right, I'm going to give you an example of something that happened in 1998, 99 maybe. I had offered a seminar called Beyond Death, What Do We Know? It was the first time we offered it at Wisconsin Memorial Park. It drew about 200, 250 people. We offered it with trepidation because it was advertised in the Milwaukee Journal, and I thought, what are we in for? I did a lot of praying. It was beautiful. It just went very, very fine. The group was excellent. It was mixed. It was fine. The next day, I went to the library with many of the books that I had been using, and I wanted to check especially a reference that I used the night before. I wanted to make sure that that was accurate. And so I went down to the public library, and if you know Milwaukee, I was downtown at the public library. I was walking along the side street, and I had all kinds of books in my arms, and I'm carrying others. And as I'm walking, this man came, very disheveled, came up to me and was almost in my face saying, "What is that? What is that? What do you have there?" And so I said, "Go away." I said, "Go away" several times, and he was still obnoxious. So I said, "If you don't go away, I'm going to scream, and I'm going to stop right now." Well, he moved away. So I walked into the library. So when I'm walking in, I have to put books at the shelf, and then I want to check the card catalog. So I put some books on the shelves, and as I'm walking, I don't know how else to explain this. I saw the most beautiful man coming the other way. He just exuded an incredible amount of peace, and he had a short beige jacket over his arm. So as I passed him and he passed me, I smiled, he smiled, and I continued on. It almost felt like a floating experience. So now I went to the card catalog, and I wanted to check that reference. So I pulled out the card catalog. There was a lady to my right. I think there was a man to her right. And when I did that, suddenly this man that I said was so beautiful, he was standing next to me. And I turned and he said, "Did that man outside disturb you?" And I said, "Yes, he did." He said, "Well, don't pay any mind to that. You're doing exactly what God wants you to do. Continue to do that." At which point, the box that I had pulled out fell. So I turned to catch it and pushed it back in. And then after I did that, I looked back and he was not there. He was gone. So I looked around a little bit. I don't see him. And I turned to the lady next to me and I said, "Where did that man go that was standing there?" She said, "What man?" I said, "The man I was talking to." She said, "I didn't see any man there. I didn't hear anything." I thought, oh boy. I said, "Oh yes, there was a man there, and I was talking to him." Well, I was not about to get into a fight with her. She wasn't contentious. She just kind of looked around with me. Well, he wasn't any place to be found. Now, what I left out was when I was going into the library after the night before, I'm saying to God, "Oh, I don't think I want to do any more of this. You know, this is going to separate me from people. This is going to cause questions. I don't know if I'm ready for this." But when I walked out of that library, I didn't have any anxiety at all. Peace just filled me, and I went about my business, and then we just developed more and more angel seminars as well as Beyond Death, What Do We Know? So when we undertake the study of God's angels and their manifestation, movement, and loving missions in heaven and on earth, we must walk, see, and listen with discernment. That's a big part of the 3-hour seminars. Wisdom and spiritual integrity require it. Our development as co-creators with God require the development and practice of discernment. It's so critical. How do you sift out? How do you come to see the gradations of truth? And there are many ways that we do that. Now, you have an article on the day we saw the angels, and that will speak of the necessity and power of discernment. That's part of your homework. And so, Susan, I don't think I asked you to do this, but will you go to number 10 on your sheet? It's Swedenborg. You have that? The first 2 paragraphs. Yeah, let me see. These 2, yeah.
Okay. Emanuel Swedenborg, the world-class scientist and mystic of the 1700s, wrote, "I am well aware that many will say no one can possibly speak with spirits and angels as long as he lives in the body. But by this I am not deterred, for I have seen, I have heard, I have felt. For it has pleased the Lord to manifest himself to me. He has opened the interiors of my mind or spirit to be with me in the spiritual world with angels, and at the same time the natural world with men, and this now for 27 years.
He's a prolific writer, comes out of a Lutheran background in Sweden, a diplomat, etc. Okay, that's it for that one, thank you. I invite you now to pray with me the prayer that you have, the angelic prayer. So if you pull that. You may have it in color. It might be a pink sheet or a green sheet, but it has an angel holding a globe. And why don't we do this? That the people on this side, if you will say the prayer, Angel of God, it's 2 paragraphs, and then this side will repeat it, and then the third time we'll all say it together, okay? So if we can begin here. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, be ever this day at my side, to light, to guard, to rule and guide. Lord, give thine angels every day command to guard us on our way, and bid them every evening keep their watch around us while we sleep. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, be ever this day at my side, to light, to guard, to rule and guide. Lord, give thine angels every day command to guard us on our way, and bid them every evening keep their watch around us while we sleep. And together, angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom God's love commits me here, be ever this day at my side, to light, to guard, to rule and guide. Lord, give thine angels every day command to guard us on our way, and bid them every evening keep their watch around us while we sleep. In many commentaries related to God's angels, we are encouraged to include angels in our conversation and prayer. They want to be invited, and they welcome request. They're willing to be of assistance to us in our needs and journey. Many of the evangelical leaders in the Christian community, as well as others, will remind us that for us to receive the flow down, we have to send something up, the request, the understanding that we are in need of the help of God's angels. Billy Graham, in his book Angels, shares this experience. When I was visiting the American troops during the Korean War, I was told of a small group of American Marines in the 1st Division who had been trapped up north. With the thermometer at 20 degrees below zero, they were close to freezing to death, and they had nothing to eat for 6 days. Surrender to the Chinese seemed their only hope of survival. But one of the men, a Christian, pointed out certain verses of Scripture and taught his comrades to sing a song of praise to God. The next morning, just as the sun was rising, they heard a noise. Their fear that a Chinese patrol had discovered them suddenly vanished as they found themselves face to face with a South Korean who could speak English. He said, "I will show you out." He led them through the forest and mountains to safety behind their own lines. When they looked up to thank him, they found that he had disappeared. All right, Susan.
And this is also by Billy Graham. In the early days of World War II, Britain's Air Force saved it from invasion and defeat. In her book, Tell No Man, Adele Rogers St. John describes a strange aspect of that weeks-long air war. Her information comes from a celebration held some months after the war honoring Air Chief Marshal Lord Hugh Dowding. The King, the Prime Minister, and scores of dignitaries were there. In his remarks, the Air Chief Marshal recounted the story of the legendary conflict where his pitifully small complement of men rarely slept, and their planes never stopped flying. He told about airmen on a mission who, after being hit, were either incapacitated or dead, and yet their planes kept flying and fighting, still operating their controls. What was the explanation? The Air Chief Marshal said he believed angels had actually flown some of those planes whose pilots sat dead in their cockpits.
The next one.
And words from Salvation Army founder General William Booth, a Methodist, one who had a vision when he saw angels cloaked in a brilliant rainbow light. In 1960, at Smith College, Professor Ralph Harlow and his wife Marion were on a May morning stroll through the woods when they heard a muted murmuring behind them. Looking up, they watched 6 glorious, beautiful women in flowing white garments float about 10 feet overhead, earnestly conversing with each other. The angels passed on until their conversation had faded out. And lastly, the editor of Leadership magazine, speaks about how his young daughter was comatose one night, very near death. As reported in Christianity Today magazine, a hospital staff worker stopped by the room and witnessed an astonishing sight. There were angels that were hovering over the girl's bed. By the following morning, the daughter had amazingly revived. The editor, not prone to sensationalism, does not hesitate to believe that angels had truly visited his girl that night in 1992. The staff worker, as a result of the incredible sight she had seen, had renewed her commitment to God and rededicated her life.
I'm going to go to this one. Do you have the printout? During World War II.
I left it on the pew. And lastly, another story from World War II. Captain Eddie Rickenbacker and the rest of his crew of the B-17 in which he was flying ran out of fuel and ditched in the Pacific Ocean. For weeks, nothing was heard of him. The newspapers reported his disappearance, and across the country, thousands of people prayed. Mayor LaGuardia asked the whole city of New York to pray for him, and then he returned. The Sunday papers headlined the news, and in an article, Captain Rickenbacker himself told what had happened. And this, part one would hesitate to tell, he wrote, except for that there were 6 witnesses who saw it with me. A gull came out of nowhere and lighted and landed on my head. When I reached my hand up very gently, I killed him, and then we divided him equally among us. We ate every bit, even the little bones. Nothing had ever tasted so good. This gull saved the lives of Rickenbacker and his companions. Years later, when I asked him to tell me the story personally, because it was through this experience that he came to know Christ, he said, I have no explanation except for that God sent one of his angels to rescue us.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Okay. Yep. When you look at the, let me stop here. The article, you have one of the articles that Susan referred to, you have that article as part of your homework. But the one that I also put in there, that I gave back to you, Susan, what is the name, the title of it? I think, yeah.
It just simply says during World War II.
No, I mean one of the articles of the man that was healed, not healed, but who died. Sister, I gave it back to you. I saw him myself. Okay, I have it. You can read that on your own, but what it says in effect, this man who was very ill in the hospital disappeared while his wife was on a cot. And when they recognized that, she went looking for him, and he was in the chapel talking to somebody. And he said, be at peace, I'll be back in a while. Anyway, when she finally got to talk to him, she said, he came back to the room, she said, who was that? And he said, it was my angel. And he talked to me about what bothered me the most, and it was his hatred for his stepfather. And then the angel told him that he was forgiven, and that I would be taken care of, his wife would be taken care of, and that he should move on. Well, everybody was ecstatic because he now was looking and being very healthy, and they started to make arrangements for that, but the next day he died. Okay, now, she understood that everything was good and it would be good for her when it came her time. Now, I share that because oftentimes when people will tell me, oh, my wife is doing so much better now, or my son looks like he's going to make it, I say, you need to be a little bit cautious here, okay? That could be that they were just winding down his earthly experience to make it easier for him to move on, which will be a more positive experience. One of the women at our church was the head of our library, and I liked her very much. I used to go in and do my knitting, and she would guide me just before our services began. She was very rational. You know, she just was not a very emotional person, but she was very rational. So time went on with the pandemic, and I called her because I wanted some advice, and I didn't get an answer back. And then about 2 weeks later, she called me again. And this time she was crying, and the more I tried to figure out what was wrong, she was on oxygen full time, and very depressed and very negative. You know, she had to leave her home. She didn't think her sons were being sensitive enough to her, and so we talked, and I said, I will try to counsel you through the phone. And so if you're not up to picking it up, just listen and then see where we go with that. All right. So another time I was thinking what's happening with her, and I asked questions and nobody knew, and I said, who is closest to her, you know, in terms of her residence? So they directed me to somebody who worked at our church as a secretary, and I said, how is she doing? And she said, oh, well, she's on oxygen, you know, full time, but she's making it. And I'm thinking, no, she isn't, you know. She wasn't when I talked to her. So I said, well, what about somebody who lives closer to her? She said, oh, one of our people does. So I called her, and I said, how is Marge doing? She said, not good at all. She said I could bring her mail to her every day. She doesn't look good, and she doesn't feel good, and she's a very different Marge. All right. So a couple of weeks went on, and I called again, and she was hospitalized. And I said, I will, check on that. So I tried to phone her at the hospital, and they said, no, they didn't have anybody by that name. And they said, could it be a different name? I said, I don't know. I've always just known her by this name. So a couple of days went by, and then I called again. I said, okay, well, I'm just going to try again. But when I did, she answered the phone, and she said, oh, you found me. I said, what? She said, you found me. I knew you would find me. And I said, you sound so different. Are you feeling a lot better? Oh, she said, yeah, I am feeling a lot better. She said, my sons come every day, and I give them the questions I need answered and the things need done, and they're doing it, and I'm going to be moving very soon now to a place that I'm looking forward to. I'll be able to see the deer around, and it won't be too paralyzing. And then she got very quiet, and she said to me, and we never discussed the angel seminar. She never attended one, and we didn't discuss it. We discussed a lot of things, but not that. She said, Jacquelyn. I said, what? She said, an angel came to me. I said, really? Can you tell me about it? Oh, yes, she said, I can. She was so beautiful. And she said she had the whitest hair, and she knew all about me. We just talked and talked. And I'm listening to this spirit rising in her. And she said, we even prayed together. And I don't know if I heard that correct. I don't know if she said, I prayed with her or we prayed together. And I said, and how was that? She said, oh, very deep. And she said, it really was healing for me. So I said, well, you're looking forward to going to the new place. She said, yes, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And I said, what was the angel's name? And she said, I don't know. We didn't get into her name. So I said, well, did you discuss this with anybody? Oh, she said, yeah, my sons and my daughter-in-law, and they went directly to the chaplain's office. And no, they said they didn't have anybody like that on their staff, not even a volunteer. And I said, well, you did. You had the experience, and you know it's real. Oh, she said, I know it's real. I said, okay, well then, if you don't know her name, keep talking to her anyway. You may have another experience, and that would be good as well. She said, okay. I blessed her. We prayed, and so I sent a note to her, and I put on the envelope, if she is no longer with you, please refer this to her new residence. Well, I never got a response to that, and I had put that in the note for her, let me know how things are going. So I called her friend at the place that she lived, and I said, have you had any word from Marge? And she said, oh, you don't know, huh? They haven't called you? I said, what don't I know? She said, she died yesterday. I said, oh, but she died with joy, didn't she? She said, yeah, her sons were not upset over it at all. It was kind of shocking at first to them, but they knew that she had made tremendous adjustments. And so I think we were in prayer for her during that time, between the first time and the transition. And at her funeral, her daughter-in-law was very much into angels, so I talked with her. She was from St. Robert's Parish in Sherwood. And I said, can you tell me more about this? She said, Jacquelyn, she was totally transformed after that visitation. And I questioned her at many levels, and she was comfortable with it. And so there you go. But I think it's similar to this reading. I saw him myself. So, be blessed with it. Okay. So we want to know about the people who say, yes, we believe in angels. What is it they actually believe in? We know, any serious student of angels knows that there's not those sweet, adorable little cherubs that get advertised all the time. If your faith has been tested, if you have experiences that have been validated, you know that angels are bodiless spirits, but they have the capacity to manifest bodies if that's the function or the mission that they're on. They are mighty intelligence, they're mighty spirits with intelligence, strength, power, and beauty. Angels are ministering spirits, divine messengers of God reported in many ancient cultures as well as modern cultures and manifesting in all historical periods. Muhammad writes of Angel Gabriel, sometimes the revelation comes to me like the ringing of a little bell, and that is when it is most difficult for me. Then it breaks off, and only then do I know that the angel has transmitted it to me. Other times, the angel shows himself to me in human form. He speaks to me, and I memorize what he says. In the Quran, we read, but verily over you are appointed angels to protect you, kind and honorable, writing down your deeds. They know and understand all that you do. The painter, Andy Lakey, if anybody recognizes his name, they've done major TV productions on him. He was a business consultant, but he also was into drugs. And when he had a really bad drug experience, he went to the shower, and 3 angels appeared to him. And they brought about healing within him, and they told him to do certain kinds of things, and they said, we will be back again, and you are to follow our directions. Anyway, I'll shorten this now. I usually show this film when I do the angel seminar. When he was on his own, and they told him this, you will be given power to paint. He started using all of his time, in fact, he quit his job, to do all of these paintings that he was doing, and he made them in such a way that the Pope has a copy of it. Many of the leading Black American entertainers have them, or blind, I didn't need to say black, blind entertainers. He drew an angel that blind people, through touch, can interpret and experience positive things. So he was healed. He committed himself. He wanted to do, I think, 1,000 angels within a 3-year period of time. And I think he came close to that, but was a remarkably fruitful in the blind community. You have a copy of a poem that I wrote, Awakening. Now let me tell you about this. I'm a writer. I was editor of my college newspaper. I always liked to write when I was a student. I wrote the book. I've done meditations, etc. I've written newspapers, but I was not a poet. And when I was in high school and I went to a private academy, I was a good student, but when we had to write poetry, I thought, how silly, this isn't my kind of thing. Well, nothing came. I never had any inspiration. And one of my teachers, who was excellent, she said, I'll work with you on this. Well, nothing came. One day, something did come. I had the inspiration that said, teenagers, a troublesome lot. I didn't even believe it. I thought, I don't think this is not for me. So my teacher said, you have so many other talents. Why don't we just leave this alone and we'll come back to it another time? All right. I was teaching at Racine in 1990, 89, 90, I think it was. And it was November, and I was sitting on the floor doing lesson plans. It was raining outside. And suddenly, the Spirit came over me, and I picked up my pen, and I wrote. And when I was finished, I put the pen down, and I looked at it. I said, oh, my God, I just wrote a 14-line poem. And then the Spirit came again, and I wrote, and I wrote 6 more poems. And throughout the year, that went on through several years. Many were published, but interestingly, the one you have was the first one I wrote, and the title is Awakening. I only realized that later, that I was at another stage in my spiritual development, and my understanding and experience of angels was even greater. Okay. Now, we have hierarchies of angels. The Christian community has, we talk about the seraphim, the cherubim, the thrones, etc. The angels of the seraphim are choirs of angels that produce the music of the spheres. They're always surrounding the Godhead, or the center from which all life flows out to consciousness. When Jesus was born, the celestial music was praised from the seraphim, powerful enough to be heard on earth. And suddenly, there was with the angel a multitude of the heavenly host praising God and saying, glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace, goodwill toward men. Angels are very present in musical compositions. Research reports that George Handel told the King of England that angels helped him compose his famous Hallelujah chorus. I was doing a seminar one time, and a woman from Racine, actually, she was a speech therapist, was there, and she was so excited to get into angels and beyond death. Well, in the summertime, she called me, and she said, guess what? I said, what? You had an experience with an angel. She said, no, I just brought my daughter to Marquette for a summer course in music, and the instructor told the same story that you did in the angel seminar. And it was the George Handel. And I said, well, did you think I was lying to you? She said, no, I'm just trying to tell you that it's every place now. I said, okay. So if maybe some of you have had an experience in something you've written or produced in poetry or art that the angels inspired, I would encourage you to say thank you. And I would encourage you to praise your angelic friends who are on angelic missions to glorify God in much. All right, now all of us, I think, either for ourselves or other people, would like spectacular angel visitations, lifting us out of a well, and I usually show this on film, stopping a traffic accident, repairing a car, healing a child in the hospital, bringing words of peace to those in grief. But when angels come to us with a message, it's possible that your life is not about to get easier. An angel in the form of a burning bush sent Moses to confront the Pharaoh of Egypt. In Christian scripture and tradition, Elizabeth and Mary, both mothers of babies, announced by angels, saw their sons eventually executed. I want to be very clear and emphatic here. And let me show you an example of this. I worked with a family from Grafton whose son, they were farmers, they were wonderful people, but one of their sons was killed while on the farm and by one of the animals and one of the machines they were working on. They were in deep grief, profound grief. So I worked with them, and then they attended every seminar that I offered. And because of their work schedule, they'd always come in 15 minutes late. They would signal me and go sit down, and then they were there for all of them, except the angel seminar. They didn't come, or at least there were so many people there, I might have missed them. So the next day I called them and I said, I'm not sure. Were you at the angel seminar last night? Did I miss you, or were you not able to come? And she was not an aggressive woman, the mother. She said, where were the angels when our son died? Whoa. I said, where were they? Right with him, huh? Well, then how come he wasn't saved? Oh, I see. The function of angels is to save from accidents. Is that right? She said, yeah. I said, well, would you have liked your son to live in a vegetative state for years and years? Would you have liked your son to live in such a way that added tragedy would have been part of him or somebody he was involved with? She said, no, no, not at all. So I think we have to remember that there are different functions, and different services that angels, in my extended family, I was the oldest of 5, and the 4 girls and a boy, and my brother, when he was 25, was watching TV and his head slumped and he was brain dead. They worked at him, got a reflex breath. He remained comatose for 16 months. And, we worked prayerfully and heavily through that. I remember being at church close to Easter, and I remember looking up at the cross and saying to Jesus, either take him or bring him back, because we're all suffering through this and we're all dying through it. And the next morning when they went into to bathe him in the hospital, his body had moved on with his brain, and he was fully involved in the next level, for which I was very grateful. And other good things came about from that through his friends and through the things that we did in honor of him. All right, angels are messengers here for us on earth with a multitude of God-anointed missions. But angels are at work throughout God's universe and at all levels of consciousness. They sometimes accompany our deceased loved ones through their transition to the other side. They sometimes rescue the dying ones, not from death, but from conditions far more horrendous for them and their loved ones here on earth. Evil is real. Accidents happen. Diseases run rampant. Sometimes we hope for rescue that does not arrive, and undoubtedly at other times we are rescued without ever becoming aware of it. How many of you have missed getting into an automobile accident on a dime? You switch and you go, oh my God, thank you, and many other examples like that. I just read of a shooting where everything was affected in the car except the baby, who was asleep in the back. It's the only one that was not hurt or affected. And when the police came, they said, oh, the angels were protecting her. And so I think that's part of our cultural, dialogue today. And so it is true. In spiritual matters, we are not in charge, and we don't have the capacity always to understand completely what's happening. And, in Job, when God speaks to Job, where were you when? We do, however, know who is in charge, and we're called to deepen our trust and surrender in faith. God leads and guides us always, sometimes through the angels, and reminds us that he is with us all through life to the very end. All right. Keep my papers clear here. Okay. Hold on, just give me a minute. Okay, in the life of St. Joan of Arc, 500 years ago, we learn that she donned and mounted a horse and swept France free of English soldiers after talking to angels. Of course, they thought she was deranged. And she said, as recorded, I saw them with my bodily eyes as clearly as I see you. And when they departed, I used to weep and wish they would take me with them. St. Joan had an intimate contact and guidance from St. Michael and St. Catherine all during her lifetime. So in the study of angels, we find a variety in the angelic order and various ranks of power, authority, and glory. There appears to be an array of color and beauty among the angels that surpasses any known to mankind. I think if you take seriously today near-death experiences, I'm talking about the reliable ones, it will all confirm that. They speak of magnificent colors that they can't really even, explain that would come close to it. In 1272, St. Thomas Aquinas said, angels can take any form, male, female, tall, short, fat, thin, black, brown. Angels work at various levels, internally and externally. externally through form, through appearance, through sound, through activity. Internally through inspiration, revelation, and motivation, but it happens both ways. In the metaphysical community, you're more apt to speak of it internally. Mary Baker Eddy, who founded Christian Science, says, when angels visit us, we do not hear the rustle of wings, nor feel the feathery touch of the breast of a dove, but we know their presence by the love they create in our hearts and the spiritual ideas that come to light our path. Has it ever happened to you that you're doing your thing and suddenly you get this idea and you say, where'd that come from? Or an inspiration, you're really worried about something and you move about a little bit and then you think of 7 different possibilities that you could be dealing with that. Where does that come from? God's angels operate from light. Fallen angels operate from darkness. Spiritual warfare is about choice making. I didn't ask you this, I don't think, before. How many of you have ever experienced temptation or, disappointment and discouragement or tests and trials? They don't come from God. So we need to recognize what kinds of energy we're dealing with. And then angels are there to help us. St. Anastasius, 296 AD, reminds us that the vision of the angels works softly and peaceably, awakening joy, trust, and exaltation in opposition to the turmoil into which demons throw the soul. Confusion. I think, Susan, you have a cup in your office that says coordinator of chaos. Chaos is a sure sign that you've got negative energy, operating in an environment and feeding people. So angels, you know this from Scripture. We learn that angels constitute a court of heaven. They're called spirits, hosts, the heavenly army, cherubim, seraphim, living creatures, and more. I'm not going to belabor this because we don't have the time. How do you know an angel from a demon? A true spirit from a false spirit? A true angel from a false angel? Essentially the quality of the experience over time. Okay? Your true spirits are going to encourage and bring about clarity, inspiration, freedom, and confidence, whereas the false angels are going to precipitate confusion, inertia, frustration, despondency, and distraction. The true ones brings unity, integrity, integration, and hope. The false ones bring harassment, dissipation of energy. And I think you want to ask yourself, if I've had this experience, how does that bring me into intimacy, greater intimacy with God? And how does this help in the transformation of my journey? It amazes me sometimes that when I talk with people in these areas, they don't understand, or at least they're not making the effort to understand that growth, development, higher consciousness is being asked of them in the journey. There are real reasons for this, and God is inviting us into higher areas of understanding God, the spirit world. I said to a person that I don't know how you're going to receive this, but that I care about a lot at our church. She's older. I incidentally will be 81 in January, but she is moving there. And I said to her, I asked her how old she was, and she told me, and I said, this is a good time for life review. And she looked at me, she said, I don't do any of that. I thought, whoa, okay, how can we get to this kind of place and not do any of that? Where are we going? This is a life of creative love, unfolds before us, and we need to be aware of that and energized for it. Now, I don't know what the time is, and I know you don't want to be locked in forever, so I'm going to end with two testimonies. One deals with Dr. Rodineo from Moscow, from Russia. He was a medical scientist, a medical doctor, a psychiatrist, but an atheist. Spoke many languages, and because he was so brilliant, many of the countries were inviting him to come to their country to do research. We offered him a seat at Yale University. And always the Russians said, no, no, no. He never went to church. He was an atheist. He said, those poor people just don't know what life is all about, and they've just been drugged. So they said, okay, go. So on his way to the airport, the KBG, whatever that is, came by and killed him. So they brought him into the hospital, then they entered him into the morgue. He was officially dead and was there for 3 days. But when he was in that state, he entered into darkness and then wonderful light, and especially with the cherubim, the angels of knowledge and wisdom, and was in contact with so much of the world of God, filled with the love of God. He's a great lover of God now. But on the Monday, he was in there for 3 days, they were going to do an autopsy on him. And when they cut into his skin, that's when he realized he came back into his body, and the only way he could contact them was by this. He couldn't do anything else, and the doctor said, oh my God, he's alive. They brought him up into intensive care. He remained there for 9 months, 9 months to a year, and then he was a believer and did try to do a lot of good, but he needed a lot of healing. Anyway, I'll cut it short. He then affiliated with the Greek Orthodox Church, and then they moved him to the United States, he and his family, through a friend in Texas, and somehow he got into the United Methodist Church and served as a associate pastor in Texas, and then taught at the university comparative religion, comparative psychology, and has spoken at the United Nations of his experience and new global spirituality. So since this is a United Methodist community, I thought maybe, bringing that. I've talked with him by phone, incredible depth he had, and he said, I said, do you have any message for us? And his answer was that God's experience with us is unique. Don't try to, compare and live somebody else's out. All right, now I'm going to tell you an experience of my own. Well, I think what I'll do is I'll come closer. I usually have to hold on to something. Okay. For most of my adult life, I had a very serious commitment to my Christian faith, and I worked at the level of education and spiritual healing. I had interest in other facets of it, but spiritual healing was really where I needed to be. And I taught courses in wellness and holistic health. I was a grief therapist and worked with, dying people and people who were grievers for a long period of time. I studied all the Christian phases of healing, the metaphysical schools, Christian Science, Unity, United Church of Religious Science. I was healed in many ways, from allergy, from back injuries, from internal bleeding. And every time I had an episode, I would work with my doctors, and I would say, give me the weekend, to work on this in prayer, or let me go, and it always worked out really well, and I was very grateful for that. But then in 1992, I think it was 92, 93 maybe, I had, a health problem, and they wouldn't give me any time. So I underwent surgery, and then I did all their treatments, and as far as I was concerned, that was a failure. I took no medication for many, many years. I was a walker, so I was, attentive to exercise. And it threw me because I didn't know what God was asking of me anymore. And so I tried to work with that. And then in the summertime, in the summertime, Mary, the mother of Jesus, came to me. And it was, every time I came into her presence, unbelievable pain would come to the surface, and I would try to work with that. But I still didn't know what God was asking of me. And so I continued to try to do, what I needed to do in my study. I said to God, all right, just give me 1 year, let me wind things up and let me leave. So one night I was working at the funeral home. I had 4 support groups that I was working with, and I used the tape, The Healing Journey. I don't even know who did that journey now. But I had 8 people in the group, 4 professionals and 4 lay. And as I listened to the tape, the speaker, the lecturer was saying, you want to bomb out that disease, and you want to do it carefully, and then you added these other ingredients, in prayer and this. And as I listened to it, I thought I need to listen to that again. So the professionals in the group, when it was finished, they asked if I would order that for them, and I said sure. And so I waited for them all to go home, and then I was driving home, and when I got home, I thought, I better listen to that tape tonight because I can't listen to it, at the end, the rest of the week because I'm too busy. So I got in about 9:20, and every night I took a bath, and I filled the bathtub to the very top, and I wouldn't answer phone calls. So I got everything ready. I got into the bathroom, and I took my little tape recorder, and I put it at the end of the tub, and turned the lights off and got into the tub. I was there for about 20 minutes, and I was thinking, this water's getting cool. But I didn't do anything with it, and then the tape recorder fell into the tub and was taking there were shocks all over the place, and then it was taking my right foot, bang, bang, bang against the thing. When I realized what happened, I started to scream, help, help. I was in the dark, and then I knew I started to go under, and I said, Lord, have mercy. I knew it was over. And so I don't know how long I was under, but I felt or heard the smallest piece of energy, bing, pick me up, and then a higher, stronger piece of energy, fuller, dumped me on the floor. Not dumped me, but put me on the floor. I ended up on my knees. My cap was off. My hair was all wet. And when I was trying to figure out what happened, I was very aware there was a very dark, peaceful, powerful presence, either behind me or to the right or within me, but it was very steady. And so I tried to count numbers. I could do that. I tried to spell words. I could do that. And then I tried to move my hands. I could do that. And so I attempted to get up and sat on the toilet lid. And still that presence was very much a part of me. So I flipped up the light, and there was the tape recorder all in the tub, the whole wire. The little plastic piece was broken. The tape was flowing into the tub, just in the tub. And so I tried to do breathing exercises. I didn't really need those. I was just trying to make sense of it all. And so then I wrapped myself in towels, and then I went into my bedroom, and when I got in there, I was facing the bed because I was going to take my robe, and I went to take it, and big ovals of energy kept going like this, over and over again on my right side. And out of my mouth came the words, God wants you alive and alive for a reason. And I heard it, and then I put on my robe, and I went to get ice to put on my foot. And when I got into the living room, I was thinking, I need somebody to pray with me. And I looked at the clock, and it was 11:20. And I said, no, it's too late. So I turned the lights off, and then I went back into my bedroom. I got into the bed, and I thought I'd better read my Bible. I always do spiritual reading before sleeping. But I had put my Bible on my bookcase, and I'd have to get out of bed to get it. So what I did instead was I took a little pamphlet that I had put on my nightstand, 365 Promises from the Heart of God, and it was from the Schuler Industries. And so I picked it up, I opened it, and it said, you do your best and leave the rest to me. And then there were 6 scriptural passages, that I read and tried to meditate on a little bit. And then I put it down. And then I thought, maybe I should sleep with the light on, the light on tonight. And a voice as audible as my own voice right now said, "Why, Jackie? Are you afraid?" I said, "No, I'm not afraid anymore." And that presence went through me and left. And so the next morning when I woke up, I remembered everything. I started to count numbers and spell words, and I could do that. I remembered the scriptural phrases. And then I got out of bed, and when I put my foot on the floor, it was all swollen and black and blue, but it didn't hurt. And so I wasn't teaching that day. And every place I went that morning, I was at home. The most incredible peace and love just kept bubbling up and going out, bubbling up and going out. And so finally, by noontime, I said, I better share this with somebody. So I called my doctor, Dr. Olger, an internist. We've had long, long talks together. And I said to his secretary, this is Jacquelyn. I had an accident in the bathtub last night, and I need to talk to Dr. Olger. I am not hurt, and I'm not sick. I just need him for security purposes. So he called me back 5 minutes later. He said, "What happened?" I told him. He said, "Is your leg lacerated or burned in any way?" I said, "No, just I have cuts on my toes." And he said, "How deep?" I said, "Not deep." I said, I treated it with Neosporin, and I'm okay. I said, "I want to know if there can be any lasting repercussions of this," because he knows I dread a stroke, because my dad suffered a stroke 2 weeks after I graduated from college. He got quiet, and then he said, "Repercussions? Jacquelyn, you were electrocuted in the bathtub last night, and the Lord delivered you, and you better get on your knees and be grateful." I said, "Whoa, I'm grateful. I've never been so grateful. I just don't want to call you in a month with symptoms or problems, and you say, 'Why didn't you do it when it happened?'" He said, "Oh, I'm so glad you called. You just come over, and I'll examine you." I said, "I'm fine. I've never been so fine." So I went about my business, still trying to figure it all. I started more putting my mind on life rather than death. I still wasn't quite sure what God was asking of me, and once in a while I would share it one-on-one or with small groups. I shared it once at our church. I was director of adult ed. And sometimes when I didn't have a speaker, or when the speaker didn't come, then I would do that seminar. So I did this with them. When they got all finished, they all got up and left. I thought to myself, I don't think I should have shared this. So 5 minutes later, 2 of them came back in, sat with me and said, "Don't be angry with us. We just didn't know what to say to you. We never heard anything like that before." So over time, the depth of my spiritual life deepened. And one day I was at church, and Jane Klein came to me and she said, "When are you going to come and talk to us again? You know, you're either with your grievers at Wisconsin Memorial or at school." I said, "Oh, I'll come and talk with you." She said, "What will you talk about?" I said, "I don't know. I have to think about it." So that week, Tuesday or Wednesday, when I woke up, the message was, "You need to be talking about the angels." So the next week when I saw Jane, I said, "I'll talk about the angels." She said, "Oh, they're going to love that." I said, "Okay." So I'm driving home from on the lake, and I'm saying to the Lord, "Don't you think it's a little premature for me to be talking about angels?" I didn't get any response. That night I got a call from a friend. She said, "Have you ever read Billy Graham's book on angels?" I said, "No. I know he's a great man, but he just doesn't, I don't resonate with him." She said, "I'm going to send you this book. I think you need to be reading it." So I read it, and there were some of those things in there that resonated with me. A few days later, I went to Wisconsin Memorial Park, and my secretary said to me, "You know that mother and daughter you worked with last week?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Well, they left this package for you." And I said, "Oh, that's nice. Leave it there. I'll take it home." She said, "No, I want to see what it is." So I opened it, and it was an angel about this high carrying a red heart. And the note was, "We saw this from different parts of the store. And when we saw it, we said, 'Oh, this belongs to Jacquelyn.' They said, 'We know that you'll know what to do with it and why. We don't know why, but we know that you should have it. And so I took it as confirmation. And then I went to work on studying about angels and trying to understand what God was asking of me. And I did a seminar for church. It was only an hour and a half, and I was learning a lot myself. And then Bill Downey, the president of Wisconsin Memorial Park, learned that I was doing it at church, and he was asking me all kinds of questions about it, and I said, do you want to come? And he said, well, that would be nice. And then I said, do you want to attend? He said, that would be nice. I said, what are you asking me all these questions for? He said, well, why don't we do it here at Wisconsin Memorial? I said, oh my goodness. He said, well, they're all around us. And so I started by developing the 3-hour seminar, learning a lot, having lots of other experiences of angels along the way. And the first time we offered that, 300 people came by busloads. It was advertised in the journal. So you knew there was a hunger out there. And from that point on, we worked with them over and over again. Now, very quickly, I want to talk about Raphael, one of the archangels. Susan, do you want to read that passage on Raphael, on the last days? Let's see, the 5, 6, or whatever. All right. Yeah. I'll sit down.
The name Raphael means God cures. Raphael has been clearly seen in this century by the English nurse Joy Snell. In the book she wrote, which since it first appeared in 1918, has been reprinted 9 times, she tells how regularly she sees a shining and cheerful angel at the hands of patients who are seriously ill. His right arm is raised, the forefinger pointed upwards, a gesture of hope. Every time she saw this figure, she knew her patient would get better, and she often surprised her doctors with accurate predictions.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Raphael has always been very dear to me. The more I knew about him, the more I tried to learn. So in November of 2018, I was coming out of my classroom, and I was going to another campus, and I was all dressed. And I came out from a very loving class that I adored, and they were very kind and loving to me, too. We had great things that happened in that classroom. And as I went through the door, it hit me, knocked me unconscious, and I was rushed out to Frederick, unconscious. And when I got to Frederick, they diagnosed me with a broken left hip and a broken left shoulder. And so they did the surgery on the hip, and I asked if they would wait on the shoulder. So they went into consultation, and they said they would do that. And then my hand was up this way for 5 weeks. And I remained in the hospital for 2 weeks, and then at the Lutheran home for another 3, and then at home with attentiveness. And one day I was with a friend, and the message came to me, let me see, first I'm stopping at something. When I met with my surgeon, I was at the Lutheran home. I went back to Freda. He said, your hip is doing fine, but your shoulder hasn't shown any movement. So I'm going to explain the surgery to you. And I listened to him. He was one of the finest at Freda. I was glad I had him. And I said, Doctor, I mean you no harm. I just want to tell you how much respect I have for you, but I am not open to surgery. And he then explained that his mother, who was 85, fell, broke her right arm, right hand and shoulder, and they did that surgery on her, and she's doing very fine. I said, Dr. Schmeling, I am not coming back into this hospital at 85 or 90 to have you do that surgery. So I mean you no offense. So I looked at him, he looked at me, and I said, you know, I've had a lot of miracles in my life, and I want to trust God for this. And he looked at me and said, I don't agree with you, but I'll stay on the case. I said, fine, can you release my hand now? And he said, yes, but you're not doing anything but very, very light work with it. So now I'm home. and I'm with a friend. It was a couple of weeks after that. And the message came to me while we were, Diane and I were doing work, and the message came to me, you need to let Archangel Raphael help you with this. And so I heard it, and then just before supper, the message came again, and I heard it. We were doing other things, and Diane went home. And before I went to bed, the message came again. So I got out of bed, and I did my prayer work and my study, and then I went back to bed. And the next morning, Donna came to take me to the surgeon, and I had all the x-rays done again, even extra ones. And then the nurse said to me, go in that room, and Dr. Schmeling will meet with you. And he's kind of like in your face, doctor. He's very excellent, but he's kind of like in your face. And so I walked in and sat down, and then he came in, and he said to me, Jacquelyn, how are you today? I said, what? He said, how are you feeling today? And I'm thinking, feeling? I said, I think better now that you took my hand down. How do you feel? He said, I'm fine. And he looked straight at me. He said, you're healed. I said, what did you just say? He said, I said, you're healed. I said, did you say I was healed? He said, yes. I said, how do you know that? He said, I just read your x-rays, and all your bones came back into place with the exception of one little one, and you can live with that. And we're going to put you on physical therapy beginning next week. So I was grateful for that. I was back into the classroom January 14th, I think, with a walker. And I thought if I can do this for 3 weeks, then I should be able to do it. It was very hard, but I did it. And then I went to a cane, cane, I think it was. So then the following, and I came through that good, and I returned. And then in June of the following week, I had all my work done for the summer, and I went to bed really early because I was very tired. And in the middle of the night, I was awakened. It felt like something was scrunching or squashing or whatever. I don't know. It was a strange noise. And I was very aware there was a divine presence in the room pushing me out of bed. And so I turned on my alarm clock because there was a light. And no, I did that. I thought I didn't set it right. No, that's fine. I still heard the noise, and I was still getting pressed out of bed. So I got out. I made it to the door. I walked a little bit further near the table. And then I turned to my right. Oh, I said, dear God, it's a fire. And all the flames from the outside were coming in. And so then all the bells went off, And we had just been all 100% safe the week before. That's what the report said. Anyway, outside we went, and we were out there for 2 hours, from 2 to 4. And then the chief fire inspector said, who was in 105, 75? And I said, me. And so he said, come, I'm not going to let you in, but you need to take a look at it. And it was, the walls caved in, the ceilings came in, it was awful. It looked like hell. And he said, you're alive. I said, I'm grateful. And then he said, we can put you up in a hotel. And my friends was there. No, we're going to our friends. Anyway, it took us 5 weeks to get that all under control. It had nothing to do with us. The fire started upstairs. And another trauma. And both Jesus and the angels were very, very involved with me over those weeks. One more story, and then I'm going to finish. The following November, after I'm in a beautiful new place, life continues, I'm teaching. It was the day before, in November, before All Saints' Day. I got up from my computer, and you know how your foot sometimes catches with the rug? Well, I felt that, and that wasn't a problem as I stood up to go. But when I went to correct it, I felt a pressure, boom, down on the floor I went, and I felt the break. I could actually feel the break in his shoulder. And so the pain was so extraordinary. I didn't go into unconsciousness. I could see my cell phone was not far from me, so I managed to get up and get that. And then I called my friend, and I said, Donna, I broke something. You have to come and take me to the hospital. All right, I'll make this real quick. It was not quick then. When I finally got to the hospital, the surgeon was fine, And he came out and he said to me, okay, you've got a badly broken right shoulder. And this is what we're up against. You're going to have a shoulder replacement or a reverse shoulder replacement. He was very good. He explained it all. I was not in a state really to be clear about my thinking. And so I listened. And then he pulled the x-rays from 2 years before, and he said, do you remember this? I said, yes. And so he said, we could go that route. And so he showed me where the bone came back and how I was healed. And I proceeded to tell him, oh, yes, Archangel Raphael. And I do all this. Well, he wasn't terribly interested in listening to that, but he did. And so he said, we could go that route. And, I said, I'm trying, but I don't know if I can do that. And he said, well, we could try. It's going to hurt like hell, but we could try. And so I said, okay, I'll try it. So for no medication, no treatment, 5.5 weeks, but I was deeply involved in my spiritual journey. I mean, it was God leading me to readings. I was watching the little bit of, progress I was making. And so 3 weeks I went back to talk with him. Yeah, and he didn't want to hear anything about spirituality. He said, this is science, this is medicine, and I said, well, no, this is faith, and this healing is taking place, because a new bone had started to grow. And so then when I left him, I said, okay, you are not the source of my healing, God is. So then I went straight with that. And as I said, I was led spiritually all the way through, affirming that, God, you are a miraculous God. But the pain was very great. And the day after Christmas, I was fully healed. I could dress myself and do all kinds of things. I was so grateful, so grateful. But it was a spiritual healing that went on. So I'm way over time. I'm sorry. But I hope this encourages you, because we need to be affirming. We don't need to be begging. We need to know that it's taking place, that God is doing it. God wants it for you as much as me, as another person. And I have been with many people over these months, being the voice of faith for them. Why? Because we get sucked into negativity. We're worried. It's not happening quickly. We don't understand all of the symptoms, but God does. And God's healing for us has been assured in many times by the blood of Jesus, by his angels, and we have to hold on. So thank you for being so attentive, and I wish you all the joy of the angels who love you dearly. Okay?
Thank you so much. And just really grateful of your being willing to share your personal experiences with the angels, with faith, with healing, the very presence of God in your life, as well as the study that you have been encouraged and led to do by the angels over the years. So thank you so much. We continue as we move toward the end of our time together to take a special offering, and it is the offering that you contribute to that will go to cover the expenses of this afternoon, and if there's anything that goes beyond the expenses, will go to support the mission efforts of this congregation. Again, I want to just take a moment to thank everyone who helped to make this service possible, and thank all of you for coming and sharing in this moment. And I'm going to invite you to stand to receive the benediction, and then we're going to close by just singing the first verse of Silent Night. And so as you go forth this day and in this season, may you indeed be open to the presence of God speaking to you through the angels that God sends and that God is present in. May you be open to their voice, and may you trust in their wisdom as you are led and as you are offered God's guidance. May you continue to have strength and courage and blessing as you seek to move through this season of Advent and to the time in which we celebrate the birth of Christ. Amen.